She thought love would save her, but when the wild cowboy discovered she couldn't bear children, love turned into a death sentence. For 2 years, she endured his brutal transformation from passionate lover to violent abuser. The woman who once warmed his bed in a frontier brothel became his greatest shame. That fateful night, drunk on whiskey and rage, he dragged her into the wilderness with his pistol drawn, ready to end what he saw as his cursed life. But when the trigger was about to be pulled, a Lakota arrow changed everything. Sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Before we continue with the story, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed, and leave your like to help us. Then go to the comments and write which city or place you are watching this video from. Now let's go to the story after the intro.
Indigenous West Stories.
The dust settled on another scorching day in the frontier town of Deadwood, where the saloons never closed and the sound of spurs echoed through wooden boardwalks well into the night. It was in one of these establishments, a place called the Golden Rose, where two souls would meet and begin a story that would end in blood and redemption. Jake Morrison was not a man you crossed lightly. Standing 6 feet tall with shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never lost a gunfight. His weathered hands bore the calluses of a lifetime spent handling rope and iron, and his steel-gray eyes held the cold calculation of a predator. The townspeople knew him as a cattle rancher, but whispers followed him wherever he went. Some said he had killed more men than the cholera outbreak of 1872. Others claimed he had once burned down an entire homestead because the family refused to sell their land. What everyone agreed on was that Jake Morrison was not a man to be trifled with. The Golden Rose was his sanctuary, a place where he could drink away the loneliness that gnawed at him like a persistent wound. It was there, on a particularly cold October evening, that he first laid eyes on Elena Vasquez. She moved through the smoky room like a ghost, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, her brown eyes holding a sadness that seemed to mirror his own. She was beautiful in a way that made men forget their troubles, at least temporarily. Elena had not chosen this life. Circumstances had driven her to the Golden Rose after her family perished in an Apache raid 3 years prior. With no relatives and no means of survival, she had little choice but to accept the protection and employment that Madame Catherine offered. She had learned to smile when she felt like crying, to laugh when her heart was breaking, and to make men believe they were the center of her universe for the price of a few silver coins. But Jake was different from the others. He did not treat her like property or speak to her as if she were less than human. When he visited the Golden Rose, which became increasingly frequent, he would sit with her for hours, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his ranch, about the vast stretches of land where cattle grazed under endless skies. She told him about her childhood in a small village near the Mexican border, about her mother's cooking and her father's gentle hands. Their relationship evolved slowly, like a flower blooming in hostile soil. What began as a business transaction gradually transformed into something neither of them had expected to find in such a place. Jake began paying Madame Catherine not for Elena's services, but simply for her time. They would sit together in her small room, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying the comfort of companionship. One evening, as winter snow began to fall outside the Golden Rose, Jake made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He had been drinking, but not heavily enough to cloud his judgment. Elena sat beside him on the narrow bed, mending a tear in one of her dresses. The lamplight cast a warm glow over her features, and Jake found himself studying the curve of her neck, the delicate way her fingers worked the needle. "Come away with me," he said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena's hands stilled. She looked up at him, searching his face for signs of jest or cruelty, but found only sincerity. "What do you mean?" "Leave this place. Come live with me on the ranch. Be my woman, not theirs." The offer hung in the air between them like a bridge spanning a dangerous chasm. Elena had dreamed of escape countless times, but she had never dared to hope it might actually happen. Men made promises in places like the Golden Rose, but they rarely kept them once the morning sun revealed the harsh reality of their choices. "Jake," she began, her voice trembling, "you don't know what you're saying. I'm not the kind of woman who—" "You're exactly the kind of woman I want," he interrupted, taking her hands in his. "I've had enough of loneliness, Elena. I've had enough of empty rooms and silent dinners. I want you with me." That night, Elena packed her few belongings into a small carpet bag and walked out of the Golden Rose forever. Jake had paid Madame Catherine a substantial sum to release Elena from her obligations, though the older woman had warned him that taking a soiled dove as a wife would bring him nothing but trouble. The Morrison Ranch sprawled across 3,000 acres of prime grazing land with a modest but comfortable house nestled in a valley between rolling hills. Elena had never seen so much open space, had never breathed air so clean and crisp. For the first time in years, she felt something approaching peace. Their early days together were marked by a tentative happiness. Jake was gentle with her, patient as she learned to trust again. He never pressured her, never demanded more than she was willing to give. Slowly, Elena began to believe that she might actually have found sanctuary in this unlikely place with this complicated man. As months passed, their relationship deepened. Elena discovered that beneath Jake's harsh exterior lay a man capable of surprising tenderness. He would bring her wildflowers from the meadow, would sit with her on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. She learned to cook his favorite meals, to mend his clothes, to provide the kind of domestic comfort he had never known. Jake, for his part, found in Elena something he had not realized he was searching for. Her presence softened the sharp edges of his world, brought warmth to rooms that had been cold for too long. He began to envision a future that extended beyond the next cattle drive or the next business deal. He began to dream of children running through the house, of a legacy that would outlast his own mortality. It was this dream that would eventually destroy everything they had built together. 2 years passed in relative contentment. Elena had transformed from a frightened refugee into a confident woman who managed the household with quiet efficiency. She had learned to ride, had helped with the cattle during busy seasons, had made the ranch house into a real home. Jake had never been happier, and he began to speak more frequently about their future together. "I want children, Elena," he told her one evening as they sat together on the porch. "I want sons to, and carry on the Morrison name, daughters to spoil and protect. I want to build something that will last long after we're gone." Elena smiled and nodded, but inside a cold fear began to grow. She wanted children too, desperately, but month after month passed without the hoped-for signs of pregnancy. At first, she told herself it was simply a matter of time. But as the seasons changed and her body remained stubbornly unchanged, she began to worry that something was wrong. The worry became certainty when Dr. Harrison, the traveling physician who served the scattered ranches in the territory, confirmed her worst fears during one of his quarterly visits. After a thorough examination, he delivered the news that would shatter Elena's world. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Morrison," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "There appears to be some scarring from an old infection. I'm afraid you'll never be able to bear children." Elena felt the earth shift beneath her feet. She had known this was a possibility, had suspected it for months, but hearing the words spoken aloud made it terrifyingly real. She thought of Jake's dreams, of his plans for the future, of the way his eyes lit up when he spoke of sons and daughters. How could she tell him that she would never be able to give him what he wanted most? She carried the secret for 3 weeks, watching Jake's face for signs that he suspected the truth. But he remained optimistic, occasionally making comments about their future family that felt like knives twisting in her heart. Finally, she could bear the deception no longer. She chose a quiet Sunday evening to tell him. Jake was sitting in his favorite chair, reading a letter from a business associate in Denver. Eleanor stood in the doorway, gathering her courage like armor. "Jake," she said, her voice barely audible. "I need to tell you something." He looked up from his letter, noting the serious tone in her voice. "What is it, darling?" "I saw Dr. Harrison during his last visit. I asked him to examine me because..." She paused, swallowing hard. "Because I've been worried about why I haven't gotten pregnant." Jake set down his letter, his full attention now focused on her. "And? He says I can't have children. There's damage from an old infection. I'm sterile." The silence that followed was deafening. Elena watched as the information sank in, saw the exact moment when understanding replaced confusion in Jake's eyes. His face went through a series of transformations: surprise, disbelief, anger, and finally, something that looked disturbingly like disgust. "Sterile," he repeated, the word falling from his lips like a curse. "Jake, I'm sorry. I didn't know. If I had known before we..." "Before we what?" he interrupted, his voice growing cold. "Before you tricked me into taking you away from that whorehouse? Before you made me believe you could give me a real family?" The cruelty in his words hit Elena like a physical blow. "I didn't trick you. I didn't know." "Didn't know?" Jake stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. "Or didn't care? Maybe this is what happens when a man is fool enough to make a whore into a wife." Eleanor flinched as if he had struck her. "Don't call me that. I haven't been that person for over 2 years." "Haven't you?" Jake's voice was rising now, his carefully controlled demeanor cracking like ice in spring. "Once a whore, always a whore. I should have known better than to expect anything different from a woman who sold herself for money." The transformation was swift and terrible. The gentle man who had brought her wildflowers and held her during thunderstorms seemed to evaporate before her eyes, replaced by someone cold and cruel. Elena tried to reach for him, to bridge the growing chasm between them, but he pulled away as if her touch burned him. That night, Jake slept in the barn. Elena lay alone in their bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to understand how everything had changed so quickly. She told herself that he was in shock, that he would come to his senses in the morning and they would find a way to work through this together. But morning brought no reconciliation. Jake returned to the house only to eat and change clothes, speaking to Elena only when absolutely necessary. When he did speak, his words were sharp and cutting, designed to wound. He began referring to her as the whore when talking to the ranch hands, as if her name had been erased along with his love for her. The weeks that followed were a nightmare of psychological torture. Jake seemed determined to punish Eleanor for the sin of being unable to bear children, as if her sterility was a personal betrayal rather than a medical condition. He would disappear for days at a time, returning drunk and angry, looking for reasons to start fights. "You're cursed," he told her one evening, his words slurred by whiskey. "That's what you are. A cursed whore who's brought nothing but bad luck to this house." Elena tried to maintain her dignity, tried to weather the storm of his anger in hopes that it would eventually pass. But Jake's cruelty was relentless and inventive. He would invite other women to the ranch, flaunting them in front of Elena as examples of what a real woman should be. He would make comments about her past in front of visitors. humiliating her with deliberate precision. The physical violence began gradually. At first, it was just a rough grab of her arm when he was angry, fingers that gripped too tightly and left bruises. Elena told herself these were accidents, that Jake would never intentionally hurt her. But the accidents became more frequent and more severe. The first time he struck her face, Elena was so shocked that she simply stood there, her hand pressed to her burning cheek, staring at him in disbelief. Jake looked equally surprised by his own actions, and for a moment she saw a flicker of the man she had fallen in love with. "Elena, he began. But then his expression hardened again. "You shouldn't have made me angry." The slaps became routine, as regular as the sunrise. Jake would find reasons to be angry. A meal that was too cold, a shirt that wasn't pressed properly, a look that he interpreted as defiant. Elena learned to read the signs, to recognize the particular set of his shoulders that preceded violence. But knowing what was coming didn't make it easier to endure. She began to plan her escape. But where could she go? She had no money of her own, no family to take her in, no skills beyond those she had learned in the Golden Rose. The nearest town was a day's ride away, and Jake had made sure she understood that he would find her if she tried to leave. "You belong to me," he told her after one particularly brutal evening. "You're my property, bought and paid for. If you try to run, I'll drag you back and make you wish you'd never been born." Elena believed him. She had seen what Jake was capable of when crossed, had heard the stories about men who had challenged him and lived to regret it. So she stayed, enduring his abuse and praying for a miracle that seemed increasingly unlikely to come. The miracle, when it finally arrived, came in the form of a drunken rage that pushed Jake beyond the boundaries of domestic violence into something far more sinister. It was a cold November night when Jake returned from town in the worst state Elena had ever seen him. He had been drinking heavily at the saloon, and several of the other patrons had made comments about his barren wife. The humiliation had festered during his ride home, growing into a murderous fury that demanded satisfaction. "Get up," he commanded, bursting into the bedroom where Elena had been trying to sleep. "Get up right now." Elena sat up in bed, instantly alert to the danger in his voice. "Jake, what's wrong?" "What's wrong?" He laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "What's wrong is that I've been the laughingstock of this entire territory because of you. What's wrong is that I wasted 2 years of my life on a barren whore who can't even do the one thing women are supposed to do." He grabbed her arm and yanked her from the bed, his fingers digging into her flesh with bruising force. "Get dressed. We're going for a ride." "Jake, it's the middle of the night. Where are we going?" "Just get dressed," he snarled, and Elena heard something in his voice that terrified her more than all his previous violence combined. With shaking hands, she pulled on her dress and boots, her mind racing as she tried to understand what was happening. Jake was pacing the room like a caged animal, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol in a gesture that made Elena's blood run cold. "Jake, please, let's just talk about this. Whatever's wrong, we can work it out." "Work it out?" He spun to face her, his eyes wild with rage and alcohol. "There's nothing to work out. You're a curse on this house, on my life, on everything I've tried to build. The only way to break a curse is to destroy it." The meaning of his words hit Elena like a physical blow. She backed toward the door, but Jake was faster, grabbing her wrist and dragging her toward the front of the house. "You're going to fix this," he muttered as he forced her outside into the cold night air. "You're going to fix everything you've ruined." He had already saddled 2 horses, as if he had been planning this moment for hours. Elena's mind raced as she tried to think of a way to escape, but Jake's grip on her arm was unbreakable, and his gun was always within easy reach. They rode in silence through the darkness, Jake leading them away from the ranch house, and into the wild country beyond. Elena recognized the path they were taking. It led to a remote canyon where Jake sometimes grazed cattle during the summer months. It was miles from the nearest neighbor, a place where screams would echo off stone walls and never reach human ears. The moon was nearly full, casting an eerie silver light over the landscape. Elena could see Jake's face clearly, and what she saw there made her stomach clench with terror. This was not the man who had rescued her from the Golden Rose, nor even the cruel stranger he had become over the past months. This was something else entirely, something broken and dangerous and beyond the reach of reason. They stopped at the edge of a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. Jake dismounted and pulled Elena from her horse, his movements rough and purposeful. She stumbled as her feet hit the ground, her legs weak with fear. "Jake, please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of wind in the trees. "Don't do this. Whatever you're thinking, don't do this." "Shut up," he commanded, drawing his pistol from its holster. The metal gleamed in the moonlight, and Elena felt her knees give way. "You've destroyed everything," Jake continued, his voice eerily calm now. "My reputation, my future, my dreams. Men are laughing at me because I was fool enough to marry a barren whore. They're saying Jake Morrison couldn't even pick a woman who could give him children." "That's not my fault," Elena said, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't choose to be this way. I would give anything to be able to give you children." "But you can't," Jake replied, raising the gun until it pointed directly at her heart. "And as long as you're alive, you'll always be a reminder of my failure. The only way to end this humiliation is to end you." Elena closed her eyes, waiting for the explosion that would end her life. She thought of her parents, long dead, and wondered if she would see them again in whatever came after. She thought of the brief happiness she had known with Jake before everything went wrong, and she tried to hold on to that memory as her last. The sound, when it came, was not what she expected. Instead of the sharp crack of a gunshot, she heard a whistling noise followed by a wet thud and a scream of pain. Elena opened her eyes to see Jake staggering backward, an arrow protruding from his right shoulder. His gun had fallen to the ground, and he was clutching at the wooden shaft with his left hand. "What the hell?" Jake gasped, spinning around to search for the source of the attack. Elena looked up to see a figure emerging from the shadows at the edge of the clearing. It was a woman, tall and lean, with long black hair braided down her back. She wore buckskin clothing and moved with the silent grace of someone who had spent her life in the wilderness. In her hand, she carried a knife that gleamed wickedly in the moonlight. The woman spoke in a language Elena didn't recognize, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Jake, still clutching his wounded shoulder, took a step backward. "Stay back," he warned, reaching for his gun with his uninjured hand. "This is none of your business, Indian." The woman said something else in her native tongue, then switched to accented English. "You hurt woman, that makes it my business." Jake managed to grab his pistol, but his injured arm made his movements clumsy. The Indian woman was faster, closing the distance between them in 3 quick strides and knocking the gun from his hand with a precise kick. Jake stumbled and fell, landing hard on his back with the arrow still protruding from his shoulder. "You crazy savage," he snarled, trying to get back to his feet. "I'll kill you for this." The woman placed the tip of her knife against Jake's throat, and he froze. "You kill no one tonight," she said calmly. "You go now, or you die here." Jake looked into her eyes and saw something there that made him believe her completely. This was not a woman who made idle threats. He struggled to his feet, swaying slightly from blood loss and shock. "This isn't over," he said, backing toward his horse. "That woman belongs to me." "No woman belongs to any man," the Indian woman replied. "Go now, before I change my mind about letting you live." Jake managed to mount his horse, though the effort clearly caused him considerable pain. He looked down at Elena one last time, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. "You'll pay for this," he promised. "Both of you will pay." Then he spurred his horse and disappeared into the darkness, leaving Elena alone with her mysterious savior. The woman knelt beside Elena, who was still sitting on the ground in shock. "You hurt?" she asked, her voice gentler now. Elena shook her head, unable to find her voice. The woman helped her to her feet, studying her face in the moonlight. "I am Ayana," she said. "It means eternal blossom in my language. You come with me now. Not safe here." Elena nodded mutely, still trying to process what had just happened. Ayana helped her onto Jake's abandoned horse, then mounted her own pony with fluid grace. They rode through the night in silence, Elena following her rescuer deeper into the wilderness than she had ever been before. As dawn broke over the mountains, they arrived at a small Lakota village nestled in a hidden valley. Elena had never seen an Indian settlement before, and she stared in wonder at the circle of teepees, the cooking fires sending smoke into the morning air, the children playing in the grass. Ayana led her to a teepee at the edge of the village and gestured for her to enter. Inside, Elena found a warm, comfortable space decorated with beautiful beadwork and painted hides. Ayana brought her food and clean water, tending to her cuts and bruises with gentle hands and herbal remedies. "You stay here," Ayana said. "You safe now?" Elena wanted to thank her, to explain what had happened, to ask 1,000 questions about this woman who had saved her life, but exhaustion overwhelmed her, and she fell into the deepest sleep she had experienced in months. When she woke, it was late afternoon. Ayana was sitting nearby, working on a piece of beadwork. She looked up as Elena stirred. "You feel better?" she asked. "Yes," Elena replied, surprised to find that it was true. For the first time in months, she felt safe. "Thank you. You saved my life." Ayana nodded. "That man, he your husband?" Elena hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, or he was. I don't know what I am now." "You are free woman now," Ayana said simply. "He cannot hurt you here." Over the following days, Elena learned more about her rescuer and the village that had taken her in. Ayana was a respected member of the tribe, a skilled hunter and healer who had never married. She had been out gathering medicinal plants when she heard Jake's voice in the canyon and had investigated. "I know men like him," Ayana explained as they sat by the fire one evening. "They think women are property, like horses or cattle. They think they can do whatever they want because they are stronger." Eleanor found herself opening up to this remarkable woman, telling her about her life at the Golden Rose, about her brief happiness with Jake, about the slow transformation that had turned love into nightmare. Ayana listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions, but never offering advice unless Elena specifically requested it. The other members of the tribe accepted Elena's presence with a mixture of curiosity and kindness. The children were fascinated by her pale skin and brown hair, and the women taught her their ways of cooking and crafting. Elena discovered that she had a talent for beadwork and began creating beautiful patterns under their patient instruction. As winter settled over the valley, Elena found herself healing in ways she had not expected. The constant fear that had dominated her life for months began to fade, replaced by a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. These people had accepted her without question, had given her shelter and protection without asking for anything in return. But as the months passed, Elena found herself thinking more and more about Jake, not with longing or love, but with a growing anger that surprised her with its intensity. She began to understand that what he had done to her was not just personal cruelty, but part of a larger pattern of violence against women that she had witnessed throughout her life. He will hurt other women, she told Ayana one day as they worked together preparing hides. Men like him don't stop. They just find new victims. Ayana looked up from her work, studying Elena's face. Carefully. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that someone needs to stop him, Elena replied. I'm thinking that maybe it should be me. Ayana was quiet for a long moment. Revenge is a dangerous path, she said finally. It can consume you, make you become like the thing you hate. This isn't about revenge, Elena said, though even as she spoke the words, she wondered if they were entirely true. This is about justice. This is about making sure he can't do to another woman what he did to me. And how would you do this thing? Ayana asked. Elena had been thinking about that question for weeks. I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. Ayana studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. If you decide to walk this path, you will not walk it alone. Spring came early to the valley, bringing with it a sense of renewal and possibility. Elena had been with the tribe for nearly 6 months, and she had transformed from a broken, frightened woman into someone stronger and more confident than she had ever been before. The skills she had learned from Ayana and the other women had given her a sense of capability she had never possessed. It was during a trading expedition to the nearest town that Eleanor learned Jake was still in the area. The trader, a grizzled man named Murphy who'd been dealing with the tribe for years, mentioned seeing a rancher with a wounded arm who had been asking questions about missing women. Nasty piece of work, Murphy said as he examined. Ayana's beadwork. Heard he's been drinking heavy and causing trouble in the saloons. Word is his wife ran off and he's been looking for her. Elena felt her blood run cold. She had hoped that Jake would have given up and moved on, perhaps found another woman to torment. The fact that he was still searching for her meant that his obsession had not faded with time. What kind of trouble? Ayana asked, her voice carefully neutral. Oh, the usual. Picking fights, roughing up the working girls, making threats. Sheriff's been keeping an eye on him, but you know how it is. Rich man with a ranch, he gets away with things other folks wouldn't. That night, Elena made her decision. She found Ayana sitting by the fire outside her teepee, staring up at the stars. I have to go back, Elena said without preamble. Ayana nodded as if she had been expecting this conversation. When? Soon, before he hurts someone else. And what will you do when you find him? Elena was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. I'm going to make him pay for what he did, not just to me, but to all the women he's hurt. Ayana turned to look at her, and Elena saw something fierce and approving in her eyes. Then we will need to plan carefully. A wounded animal is most dangerous when cornered. They spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Ayana taught Elena skills she had never imagined needing. How to move silently through the forest, how to track a man without being seen, how to use a knife effectively in close combat. Elena proved to be a quick learner, her motivation sharpening her focus to a razor's edge. Remember, Ayana told her as they practiced with wooden knives, the goal is not to become like him. The goal is to stop him. There is a difference. Elena nodded, though she was not entirely sure she understood the distinction. The anger that had been building inside her for months felt like a living thing, demanding satisfaction. She told herself that what she planned was justice, but in her darker moments, she wondered if Ayana was right about the dangerous nature of revenge. They left the village on a warm morning in late spring, riding toward the town where Murphy had last seen Jake. Elena felt a mixture of fear and anticipation as they traveled, her heart racing with the knowledge that she was finally taking action after months of hiding. The town of Cedar Falls was larger than Elena remembered, with new buildings and businesses that spoke of growth and prosperity. They stabled their horses at the livery and took rooms at a small boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. "We're looking for work," Ayana told the woman, her English carefully formal. "Perhaps you know of opportunities for women with skills in sewing and cooking." Mrs. Patterson looked them over with shrewd eyes. "There's always work for willing hands. The Silver Dollar Saloon is looking for girls, but I don't suppose that's what you had in mind." Elena felt a chill at the mention of saloon work, but she forced herself to remain calm. "What kind of establishment is the Silver Dollar?" "Oh, it's respectable enough, I suppose. Not like some of the places in the rougher part of town. They serve food and drinks, have a few rooms upstairs for travelers. The owner, Mr. Garrett, is a decent man, as far as I know." That evening, Eleanor and Ayana walked through the town, familiarizing themselves with the layout and listening for any mention of Jake. It didn't take long to find what they were looking for. "Morrison's been in here every night for a week," they heard a bartender telling a customer at the Silver Dollar. "Drinks himself stupid and talks about his missing wife. Getting to be a real problem." Elena felt her pulse quicken. Jake was here, in this very saloon, probably at this very moment. She looked around the crowded room, searching for a familiar figure among the cowboys and merchants. "There," Ayana whispered, nodding toward a corner table. Elena followed her gaze and felt her breath catch. Jake sat alone at a small table, a half-empty bottle of whiskey in front of him. He looked older than she remembered, his face gaunt and his clothes disheveled. The arrow wound had healed, but she could see that his right arm hung at an awkward angle, suggesting permanent damage. "He looks different," Elena murmured. "Guilt and anger eat a man from inside," Ayana replied. "Makes him weak." They watched Jake for nearly an hour, noting his habits and behavior. He drank steadily but not quickly, his eyes constantly scanning the room as if searching for something. Occasionally he would mutter to himself, his lips moving in what appeared to be angry conversation with invisible companions. "Tomorrow night," Elena decided. "We'll approach him tomorrow night." They spent the next day making final preparations. Elena visited the general store and purchased a new dress, something that would help disguise her appearance. Ayana acquired a bottle of laudanum from the local doctor, claiming it was for an elderly relative with chronic pain. As evening approached, Elena felt her nerves beginning to fray. She had rehearsed what she would say, had planned every detail of their approach, but she could not shake the feeling that something would go wrong. "Are you ready?" Ayana asked as they prepared to leave their room. Elena looked at herself in the small mirror, barely recognizing the woman who stared back. The months with the tribe had changed her in fundamental ways. She was leaner and stronger, her skin bronzed by sun and wind. Her hair was longer and darker, and her eyes held a hardness that had not been there before. "I'm ready," she said, and meant it. The Silver Dollar was crowded when they arrived, filled with the usual mix of cowboys, merchants, and travelers. Elena spotted Jake immediately, sitting at the same corner table he had occupied the night before. He was already well into his evening's drinking, his movements loose and uncoordinated. Elena took a deep breath and walked toward his table, Ayana following at a discreet distance. Jake looked up as she approached, his eyes struggling to focus on her face. "Mind if I sit?" Elena asked, her voice pitched higher than normal and carrying a slight accent she had learned from one of the Mexican women in the tribe. Jake squinted at her, clearly trying to decide if he knew her. "Do I know you?" "I don't think so," Elena replied, settling into the chair across from him. "I'm new in town, Maria Gonzalez." Jake's eyes traveled over her face and figure with the practiced assessment of a man accustomed to evaluating women. "You're a pretty little thing. What brings you to Cedar Falls?" Looking for work, Elena said, allowing a note of vulnerability to creep into her voice. I heard there might be opportunities for a woman with particular skills. Jake's interest sharpened. What kind of skills? Elena leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. The kind that make a man forget his troubles. Jake laughed, but there was no warmth in the sound. I've got troubles that would take more than one woman to make me forget. Try me, Elena challenged, signaling the bartender for 2 glasses. For the next hour, Elena played the role of an interested stranger, listening to Jake's increasingly slurred complaints about his life. He told her about his ungrateful wife who had run away, about the Indian savages who had attacked him, about the way people in town looked at him with pity and contempt. She was nothing but a whore anyway, Jake said, his voice growing louder and more belligerent. Barren whore who couldn't even do the one thing women are supposed to do. I should have put her down like a lame horse. Elena felt her carefully maintained composure beginning to crack, but she forced herself to remain calm. That's terrible, she said, refilling his glass with whiskey that Ayanna had quietly dosed with laudanum. A man deserves better than that. Damn right he does, Jake agreed, draining his glass in one gulp. A man works hard, builds something with his own hands. He deserves a woman who can give him sons, not some used-up whore who... His words began to slur more heavily as the laudanum took effect. Elena watched as his eyes grew glassy and unfocused, his head beginning to nod forward. You know what? Jake said, his voice now barely above a whisper. You remind me of someone. Can't quite place it. But maybe we should get some fresh air, Elena suggested, standing and moving to his side. You look like you could use it. Jake tried to stand but swayed dangerously. Elena caught his arm, supporting his weight as she guided him toward the saloon's back door. Ayanna appeared at his other side, and together they helped him outside into the alley behind the building. The cool night air seemed to revive Jake slightly, and he looked around in confusion. Where are we? What's happening? You're getting what you deserve, Elena said, dropping the accent and allowing her real voice to emerge. Jake's eyes widened as recognition finally dawned. Elena, but you're... How did you... Surprised to see me? Elena asked, pulling a knife from beneath her shawl. You shouldn't be. You always said you'd find me if I tried to run. Jake tried to back away, but the laudanum had robbed him of coordination and strength. He stumbled against the wall of the building, his injured arm useless at his side. You can't do this, he gasped. I'm your husband. You belong to me. I don't belong to anyone, Elena replied, pressing the knife against his throat. And you're not my husband. A husband protects his wife, cherishes her, loves her. You're just a monster who happened to have a piece of paper. Jake's eyes darted between Elena and Ayanna, finally understanding that he was completely at their mercy. Please, he whispered. I'm sorry. I was drunk. I was angry. I didn't mean... You meant every word, Elena interrupted. You meant every blow, every cruel word, every moment of terror you put me through. And you would have killed me if Ayanna hadn't stopped you. I'll change, Jake pleaded. I'll be different. We can start over. Elena studied his face, seeing the fear and desperation there. For a moment, she almost felt sorry for him. Then she remembered the months of abuse, the night in the canyon, the other women he would hurt if he lived. You're right about one thing, she said finally. You will be different. The knife moved quickly, precisely, finding the spot Ayanna had taught her would cause the most damage with the least suffering. Jake's eyes widened in shock, then slowly closed as his life ebbed away. Elena stepped back, looking down at the man who had once held such power over her. He seemed smaller in death, diminished and pathetic. She felt no satisfaction in his death, but she also felt no regret. It is finished, Ayanna said quietly. Elena nodded, wiping the knife clean on Jake's shirt before tucking it back beneath her shawl. Yes, it's finished. They left Cedar Falls that same night, riding hard toward the hidden valley where the tribe waited. Elena never looked back, never wondered what the townspeople would think when they found Jake's body in the alley. She had closed a chapter of her life that had been written in blood and pain, and she was ready to begin writing a new one. As they rode through the darkness, Eleanor thought about the woman she had been when she first arrived at the Golden Rose, frightened and desperate and alone. She thought about the woman she had become during her brief happiness with Jake, hopeful and trusting and naive. And she thought about the woman she was now, strong and capable and free. The transformation had cost her everything she thought she wanted, but it had given her something far more valuable: the knowledge that she could survive anything, that she could fight back against those who would harm her, that she was nobody's property but her own. When they finally reached the valley, the sun was rising over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. Eleanor looked up at the light and smiled, feeling truly free for the first time in her life. She had found her way home.